Let's open up the new vintage collection Luke Skywalker X-Wing pilot figure. Villa Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, thanks for visiting Villa Varykino. I'm really excited today. I'm going to be opening up another figure from that fantastic new wave from the vintage collection line by Hasbro of characters from A New Hope. This one is Luke Skywalker in his X-Wing pilot gear from A New Hope. This one's new, but also technically a reissue. This one is VC158, but even if you already have the original version of this figure, I think this one is worth picking up. There are a few differences, which I think definitely make it a must-have for me personally. I love the way that this one looks alongside the other figures from this A New Hope wave. We have Darth Vader, Princess Leia, Luke in his X-Wing pilot gear, of course, Stormtrooper, and R2-D2. I've opened up a few of them and I'll have those videos linked down below, but now it is Luke's turn and I cannot wait to open them up. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, of course, I'll take a closer look at the figure when we get him out of the packaging. We can check out all of the details, but first let's take one last look at the backing card. I have a couple of carded examples of Luke Skywalker action figures in his X-Wing pilot outfit for a little bit of comparison and conversation. Over here we have the original Kenner Return of the Jedi carded example there. This one is the Saga collection from 2006, and this one is the recent 2024 reissue of VC158. We can see the iconic backing card style used across all three here, obviously going all the way back to the A New Hope version released by Kenner. I like the fact that all three use pretty much the same promotional image here of Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker, but when we put them side by side, we can see that they have upgraded over the years. This one is a little bit soft and out of focus. The color is a little bit muted. Obviously, the whole backing card is very old. The colors are not as true as when they were originally produced. Over here, they've tried to sharpen the image somewhat. Kind of works, but now in the modern era where we have absolutely brilliant versions of the original trilogy films that have been a little bit cleaned up with modern imagery tech, this one looks so much better. It's a much clearer image, the colors look truer, and we can just see some of the details, particularly around darker images like the gloves that he's holding in his hands. I just really like it. Also, the placement has changed a little bit. We can see that the top of this sort of ladder section here is completely cut off in these versions, so they have tweaked the placement of the image just a little bit, but pretty much the same here. I really like the fact that this new vintage collection 2024 figure goes back more true to the original blue used for the nameplate and behind the figure. We had that lovely pale iconic blue here for the vintage one. They went with a dark blue for the Saga collection, even though they're trying to emulate the original style here. And then we've got something a little bit more true, slightly darker than this version, but again, the printing colors have probably changed on this vintage example over the years. I also like the fact that they have gone back to putting sort of the subtitle of the character, as it were, in brackets underneath. We have Luke Skywalker in brackets X-Wing pilot. Over here we have Luke Skywalker X-Wing fighter pilot in brackets underneath, and this one we have Luke Skywalker X-Wing pilot. I don't like the way that they do that. I much prefer the kind of standardized brackets underneath for the variations, particularly since Luke is one of those characters that actually has quite a few outfits in A New Hope. If you think about all of the different versions that he wears in A New Hope, he actually has more outfit changes than Princess Leia, which is really saying something. So I like having it underneath there to differentiate from like his ceremonial outfit, his Stormtrooper disguise, Farm Boy Luke. Yeah, I just like it. It's just a little bit cleaner and it makes me think of the vintage style there as well. We do have some increase in accessories here over time. This one, we have a helmet. This one does not have any lightsaber accessories. I don't know particularly why they decided to put lightsaber accessories with this version of Luke in the Saga collection, considering the vintage one does not. He has a blaster and a helmet that doesn't come off. This one here, he has a removable helmet, a lit lightsaber lightsaber, we have a blaster down here, and for some reason, he has Darth Vader's lightsaber attached to his belt. A little bit of an odd, perhaps a mistake there, not really sure why. This one, we don't have any lightsabers. It kind of makes more sense that this version of Luke doesn't have a lit lightsaber. I don't really know why it was in here. It kind of looks a little bit busy with all of that. But of course, the biggest thing we can see here is just the details going up in scale in terms of just the accuracy. We've got not a really good likeness of Mark Hamill here. This one, the face doesn't really look like Mark at all. And this one, it's got to be one of the best sculpts, personally for me, of Mark Hamill as a sort of farm boy, that A New Hope version of Luke. I think it looks really good. And the details, just the scale of everything, looks absolutely fantastic. We have the iconic Kenner logo in the same place in all three cards. And we have the A New Hope logo here in the top right. Obviously, this is Return of the Jedi. We have the single chrome racetrack, but the original version would have the double racetrack like we see here going from the Star Wars logo, and we would have the art of Luke and Leia up here at the top. Now, for just a quick little comparison, earlier versions of this logo from the vintage collection had the modern warning label in the top right, which covers the lightsaber part of this art, and we can see the Kenner logo down the bottom. In this new version, this is why I really like this new reissue. They moved the warning box down here, so it no longer covers the lightsaber. A lot cleaner, still abides by modern toy safety rules. We've got a clear warning, not for children under 3 years, but it's no longer covering that iconic part of the backing card. We didn't have really a warning sticker at all back in 2006. Kind of interesting. I don't think that would fly in modern toy stores anymore. We do have the 4+ sticker here, but we also had the ages 4 and up on the vintage one, so that makes sense. Turning the backing cards around to look at the back, of course, we have that iconic vintage style here for the Return of the Jedi card with all of the ones to collect there pictured. For the Saga collection here, we have a picture of the vintage Star Wars backing card there. We can see that Luke and Leia and double chrome racetrack design here with the original one. This version that they have pictured here does have the Luke Skywalker X-Wing pilot, not in brackets. I think that's interesting there. And of course, we have some of the other Saga collection figures there. This new reissue of VC158 does differ from the earlier versions. If we look back at some of the other vintage collection figures, this one is VC275, the Boba Fett I showed earlier. We can see that it had a slightly more vintage inspired one with those colored rectangles showing other figures from the assortment. This new one sort of goes back to the Saga collection style with this accent color from the backing card front used there. And this one, it just talks about action figures in general. This one includes a blurb about the character. So we have here, Luke Skywalker uses the power of the Force and his piloting skills to destroy the Death Star. A little bit of a spoiler there, but honestly, it's kind of funny. And then we just have a whole lot of copyright text. It's kind of a shame. We think about how much real estate has kind of shrunken down on the backing cards for all of this text that just isn't pretty. We've got a lot of warnings here, small parts in all of the different languages. It's a requirement for modern toys. It's kind of a shame that we still have so much cool imagery here, collect all 5 and all that kind of stuff, all sorts of fun things. I love seeing the hyperspace logo, very nostalgic for me. And of course, we barely had anything about different languages or any sort of toy safety back in the vintage era. So really fun to see all of the different backing cards. The differences in this backing card with the warning label changing position on the front and the differences between the backing styles does make this one a must-have. Personally, if you like to keep your figures mint on card. Earlier VC collections will have this backing card style. This one has the modern style. And of course, with that warning label shifted, I think the backing card looks really cool from the front. But enough looking at cardboard. Let's open up the figure and check it out. Now I have the Luke Skywalker X-Wing pilot figure and his 2 accessories out of the packaging so we can take a closer look. There is a lot to be excited about here. X-Wing pilots have a lot of details and I'm already impressed by what I can see. I'm going to start off with the facial likeness. Mark Hamill's face is one of those ones that can be a little bit tricky to render in plastic form. Certainly, we've seen some interesting takes on Mark Hamill's likeness for action figures over the years. And I gotta say, this one is, I think, one of my favorites. I do see Luke Skywalker when I look at this, and the digital printing really does add in with that subtle detail around the eyes. I really like this one. There are a couple of interesting things about the hair. I know the color of Luke's hair, particularly in A New Hope, can be the subject of much debate. He is very much blonde in this one. I do like the sculpting of his hair, and there was something that I thought I could see through the bubble, but now that I have him out, I can see much more clearly, and that is the digital printing highlights over his hair. We have a subtler, more paler, sort of a blonde accent. You can kind of see potentially best here, where we have a little bit of a swish here in a paler color. And when we look really close, I can see it in person. Not sure if the camera can even look up that close. I can see those very fine digital printing dots. I thought maybe there was something going on when I could see it through the bubble. Some patches up here, I could just make it out as well. I haven't really sort of noticed the dot printing so prominently. I think perhaps the paler color of his hair here does make it stand out. I can see that the hair is sculpted separately. We get a little bit of a gap there. We've got some really nice definition around here at the front. Unfortunately, we have this very small gap here where it looks like there is a small attachment sort of peg hole at sort of the temple area where the hair on this particular figure has not been completely covering that little gap there. It's very small. I'm only looking at it very close up and noticing it. And this will probably be one of those things that will vary from figure to figure. This is just how this one comes. Probably just needs to be pushed a little bit more further forward, or perhaps just twisted a little bit before being glued down in place. But overall, it's not too bad. I've certainly seen worse. Sometimes you get glue or huge big gaps when hair pieces have been applied. Obviously, we wish our figures looked perfect. This particular figure is very hard to find here in New Zealand. It gets snatched as soon as it shows up anywhere, so you're going to grab what you can find. I didn't spot two of this one at the same store. I believe this one in particular is only one per case, so most of our stores there's only the one. I couldn't see it beside another figure, but overall I am very much a fan of the face sculpt of this figure. Looks really good. Moving down, we've got the X-Wing Pilot chest box. Now this one has a ton of fine detail with it. My husband has a X-Wing Pilot costume, so I am very familiar with the details of these chest boxes. There's a lot of different colors, little rocker switches, all these little details, and this is all pretty well replicated here. There is a tiny little web paint here of white, which might even scratch off. So very fine. You can just see it there. I am looking very close up, but I'm really impressed that these little circle details, all of the buttons are all pretty well painted, and just Hasbro has actually gone and done all of those different colors. Back in the old day, we just used to have, you know, gray with maybe a few spots of color there just to sort of add in those details. And we've got this tubing point here that goes into a little insertion point there in the flight suit underneath. I don't think this is removable. It does look to be sculpted in one piece with the chest box here, so I am going to be a little bit careful. It does have a pretty good amount of flex, but it is just below that sort of chest articulation point. So I'm not going to be doing any wild twisting to the side because I don't want to dislodge this point, because even if it is inserted with a peg, I don't want to risk snapping it off or trying anything too risky there. We've got the sort of arm flares here, the sort of code cylinders painted in silver there. We've got another bit of silver here where sort of the compad would be under the glove. Plain pockets there on the other side, and the sort of flight vest here is white. We don't have any painted detail for the buckle here on the back, but we can see the strap for his chest box there going around the back of the neck. Nice to see that detail there. And I like the fact that the sort of ejection harness is a separate sculpted piece which has been sort of attached on over the top. It isn't just painted over the orange flight suit. You can see how we can see those sort of grooves where it has been attached over the top. You can even see just a little bit in there where we're sort of seeing the channels in the sculpting of the flight suit where this would be fitting around it. And with a little bit of wiggling, we can move it around on the legs as well, which is good because the position will be different from figure to figure, and you generally want to have these out of the way if you're going to be bending the knees as well. It's just better for the figure to not be stretching the part over the knees. I like the gloss of the gloves. Looking very nice there. And we've got some fine detail here. For the sort of leg flares here, we've got that sort of military green webbing there with all of those silver details around the top of the boot. Got a little bit of orange kind of peeking around there at the bottom. Got a tiny little bit here which hasn't completely been painted black, but again, really, really minimal. And of course, if we look at where this boot lines up with this one, it's pretty much as I would expect. The boot kind of ends here, so it doesn't actually throw me off completely that we would be seeing a little bit of orange of the flight suit kind of hanging down underneath this little section here. I really like how all of the details on this feel separate and well defined, not just kind of just painted on. Very nice, lots of fine detail. I know that we probably own a few versions of Luke X-Wing pilot figures over the years, but one thing about this particular figure is you can put his helmet on and kind of put him in the back. So for me personally, I knew that I would be putting this one in the front of my sort of pilot briefing scene because I don't want to tuck him away in an X-Wing pilot cockpit. I think that that one would just be a disservice to this particular figure, but I kind of like the idea of like upgrading my X-Wing Luke figure. So whichever is the newest, most accurate version goes in the front, and previous versions put their X-Wing pilot helmet on and we put them towards the back, and they can kind of just be generic X-Wing pilots there in the back, because I think this one absolutely looks fantastic. We've got those sort of bands there under the arm connecting the vest front and back. Very nice. Some versions of the costume, if you are a member or costumer of the Rebel Legion, there is a sort of a band that attaches this chest box. You can kind of see it here in the sculpting. We've got sort of a darker color loop around the neck. And in some costuming clubs, there is also a dark strap that runs from this chest box around the back here. We don't have a dark band here, so I'm going to be sort of looking up my specific Luke costume references. I know for some other X-Wing pilots we have a dark strap here, but Luke's is all white on this particular figure there. So let's check out his articulation. When I got this one out of the package, I could feel that he already wants to move a lot. A lot of the times when I'm first testing out the articulation of my vintage collection figures, everything's very tight. This one, particularly around the chest, he wants to move, which is kind of sometimes I'm a little bit stressed about tight articulation points. I'm worried that these little hinges and things are going to snap and that I'm going to be sort of stressing them. But sometimes also we don't want really loose hinges because they generally get worse with age and as we sort of trial them out. There are some figures that, end up sort of keeling over on your display shelves because their knees and joints just sort of give way over time. And yeah, like some of those Genosians, some battle droids, those small joints just kind of really don't handle time well. Obviously, I like this particularly because he was a little bit kind of askew in the packaging. I like having this tubing being a little bit closer to the flight vest. That just feels a little bit more accurate because it gives him a much more sort of leaning back askew position to have such a gap between these 2 points. I like being able to sort of straighten them up. And yeah, just good articulation, particularly if you do want to put this in a seated cockpit position. We've got a lot of maneuverability there. So he's got pretty good articulation here at the shoulders. There's nothing that's going to be impacting his ability to raise his arms. We don't have any shoulder bell armor or anything like that. We've got swivels here. Let's go and move his elbows there and his hands as well. Very hidden there in the black, but of course we've got that wrist articulation there as well. It doesn't look like his glove pivots at this point. That is simply sculpted. There isn't an articulation point there, just at the elbow, and we don't have anything in the upper arm either. It would cut through the sculpting here. So I like that. I like the way that the sort of flight suit comes down here at the back. So when we put his arms up, we've got pretty good clearance for the flared sort of gauntlet section of his gloves. I was a little bit worried about how much that might impact on his elbows there. It's going to get to about that point. It's not really going to go any higher, but he's not holding a two-handed weapon like stormtroopers. He doesn't need to bring his arms too close into his chest, just kind of X-wing. And now this one's going to be really tight and bother me. There we go. Bring that in a little bit tighter. Now, the flight suit has articulation here at the top of the thigh, quite well hidden across the top of the pockets here. I almost didn't spot it on this one. I see it a little bit more clearer on this one, running all the way. But because we've got this harness around his legs, it makes me a little bit anxious. See if I can move this one up over his knees. Oh, there we go, a little bit better. I'm not sure how well we're going to be able to move, and I feel like that one is quite twisted actually, that top one, because I can see this hinge here. It's like his leg is going to go out to the side. This one, it's more towards the back, so I'm probably going to try the articulation on this leg. That's really going to pull a bit. It's going to take a bit of a, yeah, there we go. With a bit of twisting of that ejection harness, I can get it so that I can get his leg up. I'm going to have to work on the articulation here because that hinge is pointing all the way to the side. I don't want to really pull his leg out to the side. I think that is going to stress this particular plastic part. There isn't a small little peg or anything like that where you can sort of unplug it and undo it. It kind of goes up under here. It's not really designed to be removed. So we can probably get him into a seated position if I'm going to play around and get this leg into a proper position. Let's test out his knees. We can see the articulation. We don't have sort of the pant leg hanging down over the front of the knee. Cuts pretty cleanly across. We don't have a sort of a draped fabric part. So when we bend his knees, we can see that articulation pretty clearly. We've got a little bit here of the top of the pocket that's on the lower leg. We can just see that across the top there. But honestly, if you're going to be putting him in a seated position, he's probably going to be in a cockpit where we're not really going to see his legs there anyway. I like the articulation here on his boots. Actually, some of the nicest articulation I've had in recent figures. I find that they're either very loose or very tight. I like how well I can move this, and I really like even just the small little details. I know this is black, shiny black, but we've even got the little sculpted detail where you seam boots to the sole. Just that little texture there, absolutely fantastic. Just gives it just those little fine details. As somebody that pays attention to costume details, I like it when we can see stitch lines and fabric textures and just those sort of little tiny details that make it look like a costume. We're seeing those details replicated here in plastic form. We obviously don't have any soft goods here, but there's just something about, you know, replicating all of those sewing details to a plastic figure that just makes it a little bit more realistic. Overall, I really like it. He's got a little bit of sort of a narrow sort of position here at the hips. Looks a little bit pinched in, but that's probably more so because we have to have these big cutouts for the articulation at the hips. I think if we had no articulation through the hips, it would be much easier for Hasbro to give him slightly more sort of realistic ones, but Mark Hamill was very young. He was fairly slender at this age, so of course he's going to look pretty slender in his X-Wing uniform as well. So just something about the sort of cutout round shape, sort of creating a bit of an underwear shape there that's a little bit more obvious because we don't have big costume details. Like stormtroopers have drop boxes here over the hips. We don't have anything to sort of hide the articulation here at that. So he looks kind of cool when you put his arms down, kind of hides those detail points a little bit better. I'm just going to lie him down because I'm going to work on his posing in a minute. But of course we have to take a look at the iconic and essential X-Wing pilot helmet. Pilot helmets have come a long way. We've got this fantastic translucent yellow section here for the visor. And you might be able to see that this is a squishy. Sometimes it's a love-hate relationship with these helmets. If they are squishy, I'm worried about them sort of deforming or just being a bit odd, but it does make them a lot easier to put on the figure. I don't need to worry about it kind of cracking while trying to get it over because he has sculpted hair. I've been unboxing some of the vintage collection Boba Fett figures from The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, and Temuera as Boba Fett does not have hair, so it's pretty easy to put helmets on over him. Of course, Luke Skywalker has a very iconic flowing hairstyle, so we've got to try and fit this over the top. Some versions of action figures get around this by having fully removable heads. So you have one sculpted with a helmet, one without. I kind of like having this as a separate accessory because he can hold it. He is literally holding it in the picture there on the backing card, which he wouldn't be able to hold it if it had a sculpted head in it. We'd have to have another accessory, and that's going to push the price up. We can see that the whole helmet is actually made from translucent yellow. We can see that on the inside, so that we've got this as a one-piece construction. Even the chin strap is that yellow. We can see that going all the way in there, and the rest of it is simply painted over. Again, the age of digital printing is really coming through strong here. We have such fine detail. Of course, Luke's X-Wing pilot helmet has some of the fine detail. There were some sort of generic background X-Wing pilots that didn't have quite as much detail as Luke's. We've got that sort of sliced onion, a circle print here on the side. We have the yellow and red V's, and of course, we have the iconic Rebel Alliance logo there in red, and you hopefully will be able to see it is trimmed in black line art there as well. So very fine. A little bit hard to see against the pale grey here. We even have the yellow sort of warning stripes here across that front little ridge there. We have the red striping on the mohawk, and again the details there on the other side. Absolutely fantastic. Just the fine detail we can get here. Something that is just sorely not there on older figures. And then of course we've got the little chin cup there with black strap. I'm a little bit worried about how well I'm going to be able to fit Luke's head through this gap, because of course we've got this chin strap. I'm hoping it will go on like a Stormtrooper helmet, where we just have this particular lower circumference edge. And of course it's all trimmed in black there. Very nice. I'm just hoping this will not be too tricky to get on over his face. His neck does have a fair amount of articulation, but it is not as free-flowing as some figures, so I'm hoping he won't really wrestle with me as I try to get this helmet on. So let's give it a go. Okay. Oh, okay. Just to see if I can hold his chin. There we go. Oh, I can even sort of adjust that chin strap. I got to get this a little bit to the side. Okay, he's going to fight with me just a little bit. As I suspected, they kind of want to move their heads around as you're trying to adjust it. But there, it wasn't as hard as I thought. He did want to move his head around, but I could move that chin strap around, and I could see his digitally printed eyes through that visor. That looks fantastic. And of course, the squishiness makes it easy to get on a little bit. We can sort of pinch it, but then once we have a head inside, it's holding a perfect shape very nicely. It doesn't look squished or distorted once it's on there, and we can just see a little bit of his blonde hair out the back there. Absolutely fantastic. So much better, personally, for me to have X-Wing pilot helmets being a separate component rather than it being a fully formed, sort of sculpted over the face. Because of that clear visor, I just don't think it works quite the same to have it all sort of sculpted as one piece. Personally, for this particular helmet accessory, I like it being a separate piece that we can fit over a sculpted head. That just looks fantastic. Oh, he looks really cool. Kind of a shame he's not wearing the helmet in the packaging, so you miss out on this coolness if you keep it mint on card. But then as a collector, I'm always looking for any excuse to buy things twice, honestly. Particularly with this fantastic A New Hope wave, it is so very tempting if you are very fortunate enough to be able to buy two. One to keep carded and one to open up to pose, so we can really make use of all of this fine detail and articulation. Absolutely love that helmet. That looks fantastic. Okay, we've got one accessory left to take a look at. His iconic little blaster here. And for its small size, I am impressed with the level of sculpting detail. It's mostly black, so the detail is a little bit hard to see on camera, but we've got a brown painted grip there for sort of the wood grip. And we've got a little silver emitter there. Very small, very fine detail. You can see all of the sculpting detail there. Perfect. So let's see how well we're going to be able to hold this in his hands. So he has got a extended trigger finger, not too extended, we can see it there. The other hand, his fingers are in a grip with his thumb extended. So this one is going to be very hard because this one has a fully encapsulated trigger sort of guard there as well. So his hand is not going to fit there. His fingers would either have to just fit over the grip because we can't put that sort of finger in there. So it's only going to work in his right hand. So this has a little bit of bend to it. I'm not going to stress it too much because there is a very fine point to it, but it does have a bit of bend. So I'm going to be very careful. The fingers on these figures are generally a bit tough, but they do have a little bit of give. And I'm going to see how well we're going to be able to maneuver because that trigger guard is completely as a sealed loop. So it's probably going to take, okay, pushing it very carefully with my fingernail, I can just get his finger into that trigger guard. Oh, that just looks fantastic. Very secure. It looks very well scaled to his hand. If I just put this one down, we can see that a little bit better there. Very nice. We don't really see him use his blaster while he is in this outfit, but you know, it's kind of fun to have action figures with at least one accessory. He doesn't have a blaster holster or anything in this particular version of his X-Wing outfit. We see him sort of later on when he's got his ESB look, where he's got a belt for his lightsaber and his blaster, but I do very much like that blaster accessory. Looks fantastic. Personally, I'm probably not going to have him posing with this one, but it's almost a shame because we don't have a holster. I'm going to have to store this one away in a Ziploc bag safely. If I'm not going to put it on display, I really don't want to lose this one. That looks fantastic. Oh, so many details that you just can't quite appreciate fully on a mint on card figure. But honestly, I totally understand why collectors do keep the vintage collection sealed because they look absolutely fantastic. I'm going to have a lot of fun with this figure. I don't know which version I actually like better. This is going to be another one where I'm really tempted to buy 2, maybe 3. I'm hoping there will be good stocks available for more people because it looks absolutely fantastic, sealed on the backing card. I think he looks fantastic with the helmet on, but then you're kind of covering up a large portion of that great Mark Hamill face sculpt as well with that cool hair. I know this one does cover up that tiny little attachment point gap that I can see with the hair, but overall, it's a tricky one. I think he would look really cool. I'm going to work out some poses to see if I can get him to hold his helmet on his hip, a little bit like we see on the backing card there as well. He does stand up reasonably well. I'm probably going to put him on a clear stand because you just get a little bit more freedom to pose them however you want without having to worry about balance there as well. Overall, this guy is fantastic. He just looks just great. The level of fine detail we're getting from the vintage collection, honestly, I hope Hasbro is hearing collectors loud and clear that we don't want them to discontinue the vintage collection line anytime soon. Don't change the packaging style like they do with the Black Series. Keep it the same and keep making awesome figures like this. I know there have been a lot of versions of X-Wing Pilot Luke over the years, but still seeing a figure like this available for new collectors, not everyone was able to start collecting the vintage collection when it first launched. We are well past 300 figures by now, and I think it's fantastic for people to get a second chance of adding a figure like this to their collection, especially if perhaps you were like us and opened up a lot of those early vintage collection carded figures. We didn't know how long that line was going to. Hasbro was notorious for continually changing up the packaging style, and we thought it would be, you know, there for a moment and they're going to change it up. So we did open a lot of our early vintage collection figures. So it's fantastic for fans to be able to get these reissued ones and keep them mint on card for the nostalgia, and also being able to add it to their collection if they missed out first time around. I think this one is great. And of course, if you're going to collect Star Wars, you have to have Luke Skywalker himself in one of his most iconic outfits from the films. So there you go. I absolutely love this Luke Skywalker X-Wing pilot figure from the most recent A New Hope wave from Hasbro's vintage collection line of 3.75-inch figures. Oh, it's so much fun when you get excited about a figure and it exceeds your expectations when you open it up. So I had a lot of fun. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars collectible and had a lot of fun. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again really soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a fan of the vintage collection line, I recently opened up the Princess Leia Organa figure VC316. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole vintage collection playlist. This is the way.